Today, the youth of Philadelphia are faced with so many worries and concerns. On September 14, 2021, two 15-year-olds were shot. One of them unfortunately lost their life. On September 16, 2021, a 6-year-old girl was coming home from school and heard gunfire. She ran across the street and was hit by a car. That driver fled. Not only was she injured by the hit and run, she was also grazed by one of the bullets. It is unfortunate that our school-age children are faced with so many trials and tribulations. Joining me today is Kevin Bethel, the Chief of School Safety for the School District of Philadelphia. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Mr. Bethel, please tell me about your career in law enforcement and how you began your journey with the Philadelphia School District.
Oh, Melanie, it's been an interesting journey, but I served almost 30 years in the Philadelphia Police Department, and blessed to be able to rise to the police department and spent the last 8 years of my career as a deputy commissioner in charge of patrol operations. The last 4 years, I had all the city operations, which was a phenomenal experience, in coming from the law enforcement space. But in 2011, I was exposed to a national program around juvenile justice and law enforcement, and how law enforcement leaders could look at our young people in a different way. Through that process, I traveled around the country. I was meeting different individuals and going to trauma training and like, what is that? And, and adolescent development, what are you talking about? And, but at some point in early 2013, early 2014, the light bulb went on for me to saying, we had to do something different. And so as a result, I would start the school diversion program, which I know we'll talk about later in the show. And I really became immersed in that thought process. So we created a school diversion program. I would leave the department as a result and spent the last 3 years 3 years after that at Drexel University as a Stoneleigh Fellow, really traveling around the country trying to convince law enforcement that locking up our children, particularly for minor offenses, and the sheer damage it was doing to them and the recidivism it would cause. And then just through fate, I was doing a project with Dr. Height. We're working, to support the school safety here at the school district. And we went from a contract discussion to me really being employed by the school district and really coming into this space and Dr. Height charging me to re-envision our work in the Office of School Safety. And that's what I've been doing over the last actually 20 months now.
Okay. And when you first came on with the Philadelphia School District, I know you did research. And doing your research, what did you see as far as the youth being locked up in the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, actually, that journey I started before I even got to the school district. As I indicated in 2014, when I was doing our work around creating the school diversion program, I would pull the data, Melanie, and I remember I've been talking to a judge at Clayton County, Georgia, named Steve Teskey. He's kind of like one of the gurus who started really addressing the school to prison pipeline on a local level, but ultimately launched to a national level. And he kept pushing me around, my schools. And so that would become one of the things I would focus on is the school arrests in schools. And I remember pulling the data one day and looking down on a piece of paper and saying, oh my goodness, we're locking up 1,600 kids a year in our school district for offenses that I did as a kid. I mean, and much of it was just normal adolescent behavior. And so it really that data would really set us on a course to say, we can no longer arrest these children in our schools. And so that, and then obviously coming here at the school district, we had already been down that path. And now we're just really expanding that work even on a greater scale.
Okay. Tell me about the diversion program.
Yeah, it's been an exciting process for me. As I shared, in that story in 2014, when I'm looking at the school data, I remember, saying to myself, as someone who grew up and born and raised in the city of Philadelphia, went to school district, both Catholic early, but public school and later in my life, how could we have gotten to this place that we were locking up our children? And the majority of those kids were African-American youth and Latino youth. And I'm sitting there saying, as an African-American male, born and raised in the city, leading the not only the patrol operations, but the school district, like, school police as well, as part of my charge, where we're going. And so I then had this passion to make a change. And so part of that was, what does that look like? I wanted to move to it because now I have all this adolescent development training and I have all these things, and I'm trying to avoid not only the arrest, but the trauma of that arrest. And so I part of a program that I was already involved with, I went to the Department of Human Services. I said, listen, I want to do a pre-arrest diversion program, but I need help. I need help with someone giving us programs. And I can say this for your listeners in the audience. I know sometimes DHS gets a knock, but they have been absolutely a phenomenal partner since we began this process of supporting our kids. And so we would create a pre-arrest diversion program, and we would have a lot of collaborative partners, but the Philadelphia Police Department, in conjunction with the DHS and others, and Drexel University as our research partner, we would embark on this journey of saying we're not going to arrest these kids. And when we looked down on the data, we identified about 14 offenses that kids were getting locked up, fighting in schools. Young girls coming in school with mace, Melany, were taken into custody, fingerprint and photographed, and held in a cell block, for upwards of 6 hours, just so unnecessarily done. And so we created that diversion program to say, hey, we're going to do a pre-arrest at the school, the point of contact. And so what happens now when we identify those offenses, a young person comes in, we divert that young person at the point of contact, no cuffs, no arrest record, no offenses. We move them into a diversionary model with DHS, along with the CUAs. There's 6 CUA programs, 6 community-based programs, intensive preventive services programs embedded in the CUAs. The young people go there. And we went from a system that did 1,600 kids a year in 2013 to our last full school year, we had 259. And so we reduced our school-based arrests by 84%. And we're fortunate, Commissioner Outlaw and her executive team have allowed the diversion team, the Philadelphia Police Department, are now in my office. And so now we're doing a lot of those diversions internally, and actually expanded our diversions to do more. And it has been a phenomenal experience, and I couldn't be more proud of the Philadelphia Police Department and the officers who support our schools, as well as my school safety officers, really taking on, really keeping our kids out of the criminal justice system.
That's excellent. And that's excellent. I just want to say for the viewers, ACUA is the community umbrella agency. So they're working with DHS, but they wanted to bring things in the community. So if a child had to be removed from a home, they're still in their community. So they'll still be able to go to the same school. They'll still be able to play with their same friends and attend the same church. So the community umbrella agency was used so that children are not uprooted from their community, which I think is great.
And if I could add, because even with our model here, a kid who is diverted from a school that's not out of his neighborhood comes back to his community-based CUA to be able to get his services, to continue that model that you just described, and making sure that it's community-based.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, with the diversion program, does the youth court run hand in hand with that?
Yeah, so that was a new project. I had been Francine Daniels, who runs the Philadelphia Youth Court. We've been kind of wanting to work together for a period of time. Fortunate over the so through that process and through that relationship, in 2000, before the COVID, in 2020, or the end of 2019, we created our first youth court, and actually based here at 440, where it enables us to send some of the lower offenses that oftentimes are not addressed, could be criminal in nature, but really is not. And so we started that process. We just built another youth court for the West Philadelphia region. It'll be a motivation school. And it is a great opportunity for us to use young people. I'll give you a quick example. We had a young kid who kept coming in school with bullets, and we would put the school into lockdown because they would, at that point, believe there's a gun. And ultimately, we send that child to the youth court. And there, where you start to unravel, where you find that there's, he's just scared. He's lost 2 close members of his family, and he believes that people think he has bullets and they think he has a gun. And so that was his way of protecting himself. And he saw that as his way of protecting himself. But to watch those young people unravel that with just simple, basic, non-adult questions, right? That you would just say, that seems simple. But for those children, listening from a peer, and so it's been young people have a voice in this space, and they can be powerful in this space. And so the youth court has now become a complement as another tier of our diversionary work as we go through. It's particularly with the Philadelphia Police Department here. Now the school police officer, Philadelphia police officer can make two decisions. I can send a young person to the youth court. We can send him to a more intensive diversion program. And the more we have these layers and tiers, the better we can serve a greater complement of our young people. But also, some of our kids don't need a 3-month diversion program, which they'll stay in the services. Some of them don't need that. Some of them just kind of need hey, listen, let's get into space and have a conversation. And they can do, our youth courts are built to do restorative circles. So they can go from a very strong posture of looking like a courtroom to immediately go into a circle where it's more welcoming and inviting particularly for some of our kids who can't seem to feel comfortable in that setting.
Right. Yes, that's awesome. Is that Francine who used to work at Hamilton?
Yes, she's still at it. And she's absolutely.
I love her. She's dynamic. She's dynamic.
Absolutely. What she does with our young kids is just. Sometimes I wish I could people just see, what's happening behind the scenes. And so she's my partner, ride and die forever with the work she's doing. She's a blessing. Absolutely.
She is awesome. And what you spoke about is real. Today, and you being in law enforcement for so long, I know you see a change now in the homicides and the shootings that are taking place with our youth. You've seen that shift, and it's heartbreaking. Just last week, 2 15-year-olds were shot, and one of them unfortunately lost their lives. You have a 6-year-old girl coming home from school and hears gunshots. She's close to her home. She runs across the street. She gets hit by a car. The driver fled. She not only has the injury from the hit and run, but she also has a grazed wound from the bullet. Kevin, it is crazy. And like you said, this young man is carrying bullets because he's afraid. This is what we're dealing with today. Now tell me something. How do you deal with, or how do you touch that young person who lives in a household where disrespect, violence, and drugs is encouraged? How do you reach that young person?
Melanie, I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, it is tough, but one of the things that Dr. Heider's charges here at the school district, because I came from raised by a single mother with 4 boys, right? And when I grew up in the neighborhood, we had the gang wars. Now they weren't like this, it wasn't randomly, it was violence, right? But not to the level that we see now. And I often tell people that high school saved my life, right? It was a place where I could find fellowship. I played sports, is where teachers and folks, I tell people they wrote my yearbook, I'm gonna be somebody someday. And so I think for the charge of us as a district and what Dr. Heider said, listen, that we have to have these relationships with our young people because we have to counter the pull and the magnet of the street. That I think people don't realize how strong that magnet is, when they're pulling on our kids and say, let's be a part of this negativity, even in their families. And I think with strong schools, and so part of that process is what I work for example, in the school safety, we really shifted our work to a restorative model. And so we're not school police, we're school safety officers. So first and foremost, we changed our name from being school police officers because we were not. Men and women do a phenomenal job, but we don't carry guns, we're not sworn. And so we made that shift. But over that period of time, we also would shift to a model around our strategic plan about being restorative. What does that mean? Mentoring. And so we're mentoring at 5 schools. We're going to double that expansion to mentoring. So we're mentoring, particularly young African-American boys as part of a mentoring project that we're involved with now. We train most, if not all of our officers on mentoring so they can be a voice in that school. Many of them were doing it already, Mel. They have been mentoring kids. They just started really naming it and really giving it some structure to it. We're doing restorative circles. So we train our men and women on restorative circles to really be able to gauge our groups of young people in that space. We're adding 3 PAL centers to 3 of our middle schools. And my school safety officers are going to be running those PAL centers. So again, that we can connect to those young people in a special way. We're actually doing a project at MLK where we're working with young kids who are coming back from placement. Because one of the things we saw when they came into the school setting, because they just couldn't assimilate well, Yeah, I mean, it was causing disruptions in the school. So we were doing some directed mentoring. So we actually have a officer just mentoring those young people because of MLK, because of a neighborhood school, we get a large number of kids who come back into the setting. And we're still, so all of that really is just trying to engage our young people, give them a space so they can feel safe in our schools, and then also, but also support them. And then obviously that's supported by the work from our Office of Supports. I mean, obviously with the transition team who work with kids transitioning back into the system, but also with our team who are doing our healing together in relationship first. I mean, where they're really bringing young people in there, giving them a space to voice through the community dialogues and giving them a space to work in and adding additional supports into the school so that when they are in that environment, they see something different, right? They see an environment that's welcoming, environment that's loving. Because as you know, I mean, you've been in this space a long time. You know, many of our young people don't feel any love. I mean, especially if they're in a setting where they're not getting it home. And so I think the more we do that, and the more we kind of replicate and give them something as a counter to what they see at home and in the street, if we do that consistently, effectively, and with and intentional about it, and doing it with purpose, I think the kids get a counter, and that was how it was for me, and I see that unfolding in our school setting, and that's why we're really, in part of our work, really leaning in. I mean, we're even doing a project with Drexel University where we're working with, we have trained our men and women to attach to the positive behavior intervention supports, PBIS, that are in the schools. Like, how do we, number one, interlace with that activity in the school, but also how do we as an organization also, learn to be better in that space. And so through that project, we really are working hard to be better. And so that, even down to our uniforms, we changed our uniforms. We were wearing like law enforcement type uniforms. Now we wear golf shirts and khakis. Now, listen, I love wearing a uniform. You used to see me out there, right? But I also recognize sometimes that puts young people at pause because they see what that represents. I mean, in a leadership position, and so now kind of soften the temperature, and so that we can really make sure that our young people know that when they come into our school settings, that all of us, not just the teacher and the principal and the leaders, but everything from the service worker, the food service worker, to the to the building engineer, to the school safety officer, we're all on one accord, and that's to make a safe and inviting environment for our young people.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I remember being in quite a few community meetings and speaking to moms that was saying that their child was going down the wrong path, and they would make calls to different agencies, but no one was willing to help them. But it was strange because once that child got in trouble and that child was in the system, then the child could get help. With your program, can a mother contact you if they're still school age? Can a mother contact you? Like, what can a mother do if they see, or a father do, or a guardian do, grandmother, grandfather, when they see their child going down that wrong path before it gets too late?
Yeah, I think there's multiple tiers there, right? And I think sometimes, and it's ironic because, I used to think the same thing because, I used to say to folks, I said, for me to get service for a young person, I have to arrest them. And then all of a sudden, I can get them into the services. But I think what I've learned in my work, is I moved into the space and I try to stay in my lane. So I don't say this as an expert, but I think, right, one of the things I learned from that many people don't understand, the Department of Human Services has a whole prevention network, and so I think that's the first place, because even the intensive preventive services that we use for our program are community-based programs that it can have community referrals. And so I think I would tell them to start there, really reaching out to DHS and to their community CUA to really say, hey, listen, particularly with our intensive preventive services, those are open programs. These are not programs just tailored for Kevin Bethel's diversion program, and so they get a number of community referrals of kids who are kind of on the fence who need supports. But I think as they migrate into the school setting, I think they have to see the school setting as not just a place of learning, but also a place where they can get services. I would advise them to go to the counselors, because now all of our schools have counselors, and share with the counselor the issues that you have, because there's through our student support services, particularly now as we prepare for kids coming back from after the COVID, there are a lot of supports that I think families don't realize. They see the school as I'm sending them there for academics, but they don't realize that they have a lot of connectivity, especially with our community schools and the program that they have in the schools. Many of them have social workers and work that is going on in the schools that parents are often not aware of. And so I think they should really lean on their school setting. And as it relates to our program, our work around the diversion work really is, we hope, is helpful in that regard. As we divert a young person from the system, the first thing we do is contact the parents. Our Department of Human Services goes out to the home and they meet with the family, because it's not just about the child, it's about a family-based programming. And so from there, they can meet with the family, and you'll find, Mel, that many times they'll find that there's other needs in the family that are unmet as well. And so as they move over to their community programming, they can help them with hey, the electric's not on, there's not enough food in the house, or there may be other siblings in the house that are also struggling. We just happen to get Kevin, but his brother Keith and Carrie are also having, and so that we also have in our program the ability to divert kids without, to your earlier point, without an incident. And so the men and women are be able to identify if they see a student who's struggling to give that support. So if a parent sees my school safety officer at the school and having a trouble with their son, they're more than welcome to engage them and talk about some of the needs, so they can also be a conduit with that. And we're still, so that's not a perfect science. We're still training our officers and men and women on how to know what supports are available. But we think we are also can be a vessel for our folks as we do that. And I think it is a community, right? It is a school community. It is all of us working together to help that parent. But what I would challenge them is this, and you know this from your work: don't take it to an arrest because you want to get control of your child. And so I want to get him on a GPS monitor because this way I'll get him in at 10 o'clock. If they do that, that's too late, because once they get into the system and they're arrested, so many of them, almost over 50% of them, will recidivate and come back. And so I think sometimes we waited too long, and then when they're arrested, because hey, listen, if he gets arrested, then he'll get under control. Well, that just doesn't happen. And I think we also have to be honest, particularly in our African-American communities, that the court system is not the place to try to put our children in to get their behavior under control. We have to work up front and earlier in the process to really, really have a long-term success.
That's true. That's true. Now, you do have the support of the Philadelphia Police Department, which is excellent. Did you say that you work with the district attorney's office as well?
Yes, we forged a phenomenal relationship. Jordan King, who's helped supporting is assigned to support us over here. And one of the things we have done with them is really, really build out a really strong relationship so we talk through. So much of the work we have done, as we expanded our work, we talk to the district attorney's office to make sure we're aligning with what their vision is of our young people. They obviously have taken a position where they're trying to keep as many of our young kids out of the system, particularly for low-level offenses. And even after we do, in some cases, unfortunately, we do have young people who do get arrested. We're able to have those conversations behind the scenes to see what's the best course of action for that child. We created a threat assessment protocol now because we had a number of our kids who would be arrested because they go into school and they say, I'm going to blow up the school. Well, a 10-year-old child does not have the capacity to blow up a school, right? But because we were in that space of the concern, with the national model of kids coming in and doing harm in our school, we had a very aggressive posture that many of those young people would be arrested. But I worked with the Philadelphia Police Department and particularly the DA's office. We pulled those cases to see what they look like and realized that we could do these in a different way. And so we created a threat assessment protocol. Now, when we go out to the school and we respond, and we reviewed all the evidence to determine whether that's a transient threat or whether, in fact, the kid needs to go to a diversion program, or, this kid definitely has potential to have a gun or may have used a weapon. And then we move that over to the police department. And so they have been a very good sounding board to support our work, help us with our expansion as we moved into some low-level simple assault cases. Reviewing, so we gave us a structure to be able to what fits into those categories for diversion. Again, and even working with Francine, some of the cases now, they're holding in abeyance before they formally charge the child, and they're sending them back to our youth court for the kids to go through the youth court. If they complete the youth court, then the case is dropped. And so they don't have to worry about the expungement and the process. And those have been really, really great cases, because many times it's group assaults, but once you get the kids in the room, it's been group assaults. We just caught the third one, not the first two. So much of it is retaliation back and forth. And when the young people get in the room and kind of peel all that back, it's helpful. And then our partners with Department of Human Services provides us supports if we need, a child in that setting who needs some help, because it's beyond the scope of what they can do. They're there as well. So the relationship with the DA's office and their juvenile section has been phenomenal, and they have been great supporters in helping us continue our vision of keeping our young people out of the criminal justice system.
That sounds great. Sounds great. So since you've been doing this, have you seen a great deal of success with young people who have actually changed their path and their way of life since interacting with your program?
Yeah, some of it's been anecdotal. Some I remember the first child I ever had, our first diversion. Melanie was still arrested for marijuana. It was a young lady from Central High School who was a stellar student who got caught with marijuana. And what was great about the process, when the social workers went to the home, they found out that she had lost someone in her home. There was a divorce going on in the home, and a girlfriend said, "Hey, smoke marijuana to make you feel better." And she was the first person we got into the system and into our program, and it was a phenomenal experience, because I think it went beyond just her, and some others in her family were also supported. And I remember, the young lady I think she went on to the University of Pittsburgh, and the email that she would send me, because she would recognize it, she was grateful for the opportunity. And so some of that we see anecdotally, but just from the statistics. So as I shared, Drexel University has been doing our research of our program since we started in 2014. And Dr. Naomi Goldstein has been leading that effort. And so we are able to track, where we see, a large percentage of our kids, and what we say is through the recidivism. And so we're around a 27% recidivism rate for our young people. We've done almost 2,500 young people we've diverted. So we can see a large swath of our young people who are moving through the system, and not because I can see it personally, but I can see it on paper, are not coming back. They're not getting arrested in the school, nor are they getting arrested in the community. But when we look at our young people that we arrested in 2013, which are our control group, I think they're around 32% of them. So all of them got arrested. But of that cohort that matched up what we divert with, 32% of them are coming back. So that means they had their first arrest, and now they've come back for a second arrest. And so you can already see what that trajectory will look like. And so we feel confident, from the data that we get from our team that this is that we are making a difference in the lives of our young people. And my men and women see it every day. And I will keep plugging my school safety officers, Melany, have been absolutely a blessing and phenomenal. The work that they're doing with our young people was not seen because they were under this kind of law enforcement construct. But once we took all that up and said, just be you and be mama bears and papa bears and all the things that they're in the room. Oh, listen, they have been absolutely phenomenal in making sure that we work with our young people. So we see it, and we believe we're in the right direction.
Kevin, I thank you so much for what you're doing. You have always been very professional and very passionate at what you do. When I met you probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Maybe longer than that, right?
Yeah, it's been that long ago when you were with the Philadelphia Police Department. So I truly thank you again for all that you are doing for our young people. I thank your team. Anything you need from me, I am a phone call away, and I will be more than happy to help. And you are making a positive difference in the lives of so many young people. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Children should not have to worry about gun violence when they're coming to and from school. This is ridiculous, and the gun violence has to stop in the city of Philadelphia. It is my prayer that one day gun violence will stop, bullying will cease, and everyone will be safe in their community. Please watch your surroundings at all times and pay attention to your environment. Thank you for joining me today.